Well, this is part 4 in a series called Landscape Design Using CAD Software for Beginners. A landscape designer who was experienced but new to CAD wanted to do a little drawing for a raised garden bed. It was quite a long garden bed. If we pick our tool that measures, it measures 15 meters from one side to the other, and we left you by demonstrating that we could fill the dry stone wall around the outside of the garden bed, but we had a degree of difficulty picking a hatch pattern. What I have done is gone to the GCAD Plus website and downloaded an image file showing the various patterns available to you in the hatch command. You may remember that's found here, draw and hatch. If we zoom in here, there's a patch called rubble and at a scale of 500. And if I come back now into the design, notice the pattern name is rubble. We were searching through quite a long list of different patterns and couldn't find just the one we wanted. So with the aid of the little diagram there, and I've put a scale there of 2000. So that gives us a view of the design, and we'll be able to label this one now dry stone wall. Perhaps we might leave it dry stone wall, height in consultation with the client. The image has been put on its own layer, L-image, and you may remember we can reach layers by this drop-down box and turn off the image layer. We turned off the plant construction layer earlier. It's a very good idea to use layer names that start with L-, because if you happen to be working with a base plan that comes from an architect, they're likely to label all of their layers ARC-. A civil engineer will use the precursor CIV-. So we're just following an industry convention here. So the image layer is now off and it disappears. Still there, we can bring it back at any time we want. You may recall that we emphasize that everything you do in this model space area is full size, but when you want to present the design, you create a new layout. New layouts are created via the Format drop-down and Layouts, and when you create a new layout, you do it with this little button and go OK. A new tab appears down here called Layout, but you can rename the tab by going to the Layouts Manager, and that's what I've done here in this developing design. So we've moved from our model to our landscape plan, and the plan that we've just been developing sits inside a box that is called a floating viewport. Here it is in the properties box area, and it has a scale. We decided that we'd like a scale of 50, 1 to 50. If we were going to plot that at this stage, you would want to fix that scale. I don't want to fix it because I'm going to change later when we put some images in here to show species being used in the design. We added a second floating viewport. I'll just scroll out a little and put a all-inclusive selection box, and we added a second one, and we put it in place because we wanted to zoom in on and present the plant schedule. The plant schedule, you may recall, we put it well away from the main design. So we come back here and we were able to adjust things here. We could make that magenta box. It's rather like a porthole looking at the design. It's a view of model space, but now presenting it on this sheet. We get to this point, we can click it and say unselect all, and it's no longer selected. To get rid of that dotted line around it, just double click inside the box, and I can move that into position. And now we'll zoom extents. So now we have our design, we have our scale bar. The scale bar we changed because it looked to be overpowering our design, and we removed the earlier one. We went to the library, we went to details and scale bars. Here we had one of these. I think we had the very first one there, and we've now, that's a 10, sorry, wasn't there. We went to 10 meter and picked that one up. Now we've gone to the 5 meter number 3, I think, and we can check that by selecting it. And yes, it is number 3. So remember, here we're in the true model area. We check ourselves. This is going to measure 5,000 units from one end to the other because it's a full size and accurate scale bar. Returning to this sheet, we made the color of our floating viewport, our new floating viewport that just is a view of the plant schedule. We made that white, but we're still left here for the moment with the color of the floating viewport set by layer. Well, every landscape design drawing, whether it be by hand or done in this way with computer software, needs a title block, which will sit down usually in the bottom right-hand corner, although sometimes it's vertically on the right. If we visit the library and details and check down, what we're after is title blocks. We do have a few title blocks in here, and again, in the usual way, you can scroll up and down. This one fits an A3 sheet, and this one fits a consultancy called Planting Matters, and so on. Let's go down to one called Sustainable Designs. So we can open it up and insert it into the drawing, but we are, unlike anything else here, where everything that you see at the moment is done by taking a view into model space. But here we're going to put this particular layout block. We're going to put this title block down here. Let me zoom in on it, and notice it's got some obviously details for name of client, site location, and so on. We've said anything we have to change is colored. So if I go to edit the block, if we're going to use this, we need to put in a scale information and sheet size. So if I come back out, close the block editor, we need to put in the date. You see this was done some time ago. But if we go to our landscape plan and layout manager, we have in fact used A3. But if we had used an A1 sheet or different size sheet, we would certainly have to keep that information up to date. I'm still going to resist the temptation to put 1 to 50 in here because I think we've got quite a lot more to do. You need to put your logo in there and so on, but I'm sure you get the general gist of what I'm saying. So our title block is in. If you think that's a little small, because it's a block, you can say, well, I'm going to take that and make the size of it 1.3 for the sake of argument, and the X and Y would both be slightly increased. So you could argue that looks a little better. You wouldn't want it the same text height as the plant schedule, but you certainly want it readable.
Well, I think it's now time to add some explanatory text to the design. If I swing to this design, here's a designer who's using extensive notes to the design to show the construction team what needs to be done, but also this also conveys to the client that a great deal of thought has gone into the design itself. So let's come back to our developing drawing. A quick and easy way to put notes into the design is to use a device called a leader. So let's click on the leader, and if we watch down here in the command area, we're asked to specify the arrowhead position. So let's imagine we need some notes about the type of walling that's around this bed, which will be now a raised bed. So we need to tell the client that there will be backfill with soil. It'll be raised up above the area of lawn perhaps that surrounds it. So text notes are the most effective way to convey this meaning. So we specify an arrowhead position. Notice that there's an aid to design. We can keep the notes at or the line leading from the arrowhead. We can keep that nice and neat in that way. And so you might say something like dry stone wall, seating height to be agreed. Different owners might have different opinions about what constitutes seating height, and that goes in. If it's selected, it's known as a leader in the properties box. It has a particular style. It's a style called standard, so this came from the default drawing that we started with. But notice that there are some grips associated with it. Makes it very easy. The fact that it's a leader makes it very easy to position and reposition if we need to. We also need to label individual symbols so the client can identify them easily. If we come back to our landscape plan, at the moment the only way the client can identify a particular species is by referring to the plant schedule and say Hardenbergia violacea is this one, so that one there must be Hardenbergia. Let's come back to the design. You may recall some time ago when we actually tagged those symbols that we use in this design, so that's tagged to Hardenbergia. The advantage in GCAD Plus is that we can add more text identifying symbols quite easily, and that's done with GCAD Plus and Smart Plant Label. There's a relatively complex prompt here. Select the symbol or adjacent copies of the same symbol and then hit enter for the next step, and then right click to finish. So there's a little bit to digest there. So we're asked to select the symbol. I'll pick this instance of the Hardenbergia and that one there, and this one. I could go on there, but I've picked 3 instances of it. So at that point, I hit enter for the next step. And in the command line, it says, do you want to label with a leader or with a line? I'd like a leader, which will have the arrowhead on it, just like we used over here, and input the first point. So let's tag that middle one there and come up. We'll keep them, you might have noticed it, yes, there. Keep it at that 45-degree angle. Do we want to pick up the codes or ask a series of questions? We can say yes or no. Let's say yes. Do we want to pick up the botanical name? Yes, we do. I'm not sure I want the common name because that's going to clutter the drawing up with too many names, and you're being paid for your professional opinion, and there's can be dispute about common names, but not with botanical names. So we'll say no. And do we want to pick up the count? Well, because we picked 3 of them up, we'll say yes. And you'll notice here that automatically GCAD Plus labels 3 copies of Hardenbergia violacea and gives us the code. GCAD Plus remembers all of those settings. So let's repeat the smart label command. I'm just right clicking, and this time we'll just pick that one and accept all of the defaults and pop it up. This time we'll go to much the same angle, and I just say yes, accepting all the, and this time we get 1 Hardenbergia. So we can still edit here. Just pick the leader and just edit the text. If I'd said no, I don't want to count, all I would have is Hardenbergia violacea, and in that goes. Again, the advantage of moving things around with the leader is quite obvious. So I'll go ahead and put some more labels of that type in, but I'll also change to a different style. This one is that standard style, but what I will do in a moment is go to dimensions and dimension styles, and I'll create a brand new one, and we'll leave it at style 1 at the moment, but you might well label that the name of your design consultancy. And I'm going to adjust the geometry and the text height and even the units there in that new style 1. Well, I've gone to the dimension and to dimension styles. I've gone to my list. I've set a new one called style 1. I've set it as current because it'll be used whenever we call up that leader tool now. I've set the geometry up, arrow size of 200, text of 200, and I've adjusted units. So we have a new style. And I'll OK that. If I go to Format and Text Styles, I've got one called Style 1 to match that dimensioning style, and I've set a font called Uppercase, one of the many fonts available to you. It's sort of like a hand font, but what it does do is put everything in capital letters. You notice earlier when we did that, we get a mix of uppercase and lowercase. Especially for the construction team, it's much easier to read a plan where uppercase is used. It may not be botanically correct, but for practical purpose, everything in uppercase is great. Right click and see if we can, now I need to go back to GCAD Plus and Smart Label, and we've got one more to add. And let's follow the prompts. We'll pick that one, hit enter, accept leader, mark a point here and pop up there, enter, 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 remembering all the settings that we had previously, and then right click to finish. These leaders are so versatile. In this case, I can just move it across and put it in another position, because if we go into our landscape plan now and zoom extents, you can see why I didn't want to set the scale in here. We have a floating viewport. We need to jump back into the floating viewport and change the scale by just dragging and moving and then returning to our layout sheet. We're going to need even more space around here because many of you would want to put images of the plants that you're going to use in and around this drawing. And we can do that by going back to the model, and if we go to Format and Images, I've loaded some images of, there's a Daviesia, a Dianella, the Teleopia, and so on, wild growing Hardenbergia there. So these images all come from our little plant database, which I'll deal with in the next module in this little series. But what we can do now is, here's Dicksonia, so we can say draw raster image, pick up Dicksonia, there it is, and insert it into the drawing. And we want to put it somewhere up here, like so. And I'll just carry on around there, pick up Dichondra, and insert it into the drawing. Again, we'd probably want to keep the images relatively straight there. You might even choose to do something like this, maybe go like that. And if we then return to our landscape plan, can you see our landscape plan is certainly taking shape, but we are going to have to jump in here and change our view relatively often. If you want to increase the size of the images, display them on the layout, you certainly could do that. So there'll be a degree of manipulation needed here. So I hope to be showing you that it's relatively easy to dress things up. I need to not change the position. I could probably get and move that one down in there. And zoom extents. Now the design shows. I'd probably want to move those images up a little further. Sometimes people add the images in this space rather than do it in model space. And let's illustrate working exactly the same way. Draw a raster image. We'll pick Dianella. Sorry, I picked the wrong one. Pick Dianella and insert it. And OK that. And there's our Dianella. So there's something like that. I don't think there's a right and wrong way to do that. So can you see the landscape plan is now taking shape rather nicely. You'll note that that took a good deal of time laying things out. An alternative and quicker way is just to create another page, if you like, and just put the images on a separate sheet. And I'm sure your client will appreciate either of those. They can work back. Depends on the way you want to work. Notice the white little dots there, that's a grid. It's not part of the page here. So giving the client as much valuable information as we can should be the aim of every landscape designer.